Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Citizens of the World, and happy Valentine's Day. As you know, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you each week for joining me, your host Al Zucaro, from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. And yes, it is Valentine's Day, folks, and it's a wonderful day to celebrate. And those inventors of Hallmark cards are making a fortune, and the florists are doing a great thing. But I thought I would take a little bit of a twist on that. In the last couple of weeks, there have been a number of items in our local papers and part of our local news area that suggests that marriage may be on the decline and Valentine's Day may not be all that it is cracked up to be. The first thing I'd like to point out is a very sarcastic type of writer by the name of Frank Serabino from the Palm Beach Post wrote an article the other day about an incident that took place in the Broward County courts where a judge, the judge's name is John J. Hurley, took a very interesting twist. He was dealing with a marriage case, a domestic divorce case, family matter, and apparently the participants, husband and wife, really suggested that they might be a way to reconcile. So the judge, who is known, and I'll read right from the clippings. The judge, who has a reputation as a bit of a showman, maybe even one of those judges with a reality TV contract in his future, announced that he was going to release the husband from jail, but with the very detailed set of conditions. Quote, he's going to be out of jail by 3 o'clock this afternoon, and he's going to stop by somewhere, and he's going to get some flowers, and he's going to get a card, the judge said. Then he's going home and pick up his wife, get dressed, take her to Red Lobster. Then, after they have Red Lobster, they're going bowling. Close quote. The husband agreed to the no bail condition on the release, but not before his lawyer clarified the detail of the bowling sentence. Okay, quote, does he have to lose to her, the lawyer asked. No, Judge Hurley answered, but he did have to get marriage counseling within a week and obey the more immediate conditions of his bail-free release. Flowers, birthday cards, Red Lobster, bowling, the judge reminded the husband. You got your work cut out for you. Is this okay? Yes, Your Honor, it is. Well, I thought that was a very cute story about relationships, and on Valentine's Day I can't think of anything but. But now, in another clipping that I saw this week that I thought was very interesting, it talked about the midwife, W-I-F-E, crisis. And it says that after age 50, women are leaving their spouses at double the rate of 2 decades ago. You know, I guess in my day, because I got to call it my day, when we were growing up, females thought that they had to be married, they had to be provided for by husbands. I think that that concept has come full circle now, and I don't know that it is applicable anymore. Women are waiting longer to get married, they're waiting longer to have babies, and now this suggests that they're leaving their long-term spouses for purposes other than death or divorce. They're leaving it because they've just grown old of the relationship, and in their 50s they're talking about gray divorces. And here's some of the statistics. Between 1990 and 2009, the divorce rate among those 50 to 64 more than doubled. 25% of all divorces are among couples over 50 years old. In 1990, it was 10%. And 66% of divorces among those over 50s were initiated by the wives. I find that quite interesting because I know as a man, as I got older, and I didn't get married till I was 49 years old, I never wanted to be unmarried after that, and yet here this article is suggesting that there are women that have been married for many years that are now in their 50s. They're beginning to look at themselves in the mirror. They're beginning to realize they're never going to look any better than they look right now. They're beginning to realize how much fun they have had to forego to raise children, to be housewives. and they're saying it's time for me to be me. So has the Pepsi generation caught up? Is this midwife crisis another reflection of the me generation? Who knows? Who cares? It's Valentine's Day. All you women go out there and buy some flowers for your boyfriends and send it to them. Thank you very much on that. Now, as you know, folks, we do immigration and economic development, and that's our next topic. Well, folks, now we're going to go into the segment of immigration and economic development. As you know, one of the major theses of this whole program is that immigration law is a roadmap for economic development. Today, we're going to go back to a topic that we've covered at some times in the past. The topic is EB-5 investor visas. And I've asked to be a guest on the show Anthony Corda, who is an attorney in Naples, Florida, who practices this law in a very significant and very high level. And Anthony and I have become friends over the last few years. He is he still is a barrister in England in front of the Queen's Court. He's an attorney in the United States specializing or limiting his practice to immigration law. He's a former pilot with Her Majesty's Air Force, and he's a father and a husband and a really all-around nice guy. Welcome, Tony. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, Al.
Last week, we had the opportunity, you and I, to share some time at the American Immigration Lawyers Association event that took place in Parrot Jungle here in Miami. And you were one of the panelists on the EB-5 panel. I thought it would be a worthwhile opportunity to chat about the latest developments in EB-5, assuming that the audience has some basic knowledge of the fact that this is a visa that allows foreign nationals to acquire status. And just for the audience's sake, Anthony knows this from both perspectives. He is now practicing law and handling cases with regards to this, but he also used this vehicle to relocate his own family from Britain to the United States about 3.5 years ago. So by way of background, would you fill in a little bit of the blanks on who you are and how we come to be here today?
Sure. Well, as you've already said, I'm originally a barrister practicing in London. I still am qualified as a barrister, and in fact, I go back from time to time to conduct trials still in the UK. But most of my practice is now based here in the United States. I handle essentially immigration matters and focus on EB-5 work. As you've already indicated, the EB-5 visa is for many people the only way to achieve permanent residence in the United States. I used it for myself and for my family with great success. We've been here now for actually 4 years and are very much enjoying our life in the United States. One of the benefits of the EB-5 program, in a way it works both ways. The benefit for the investor, of course, is that he or she and spouse and children under the age of 21 all become permanent residents and are able to apply to become US citizens after a 5-year residence period. The advantage, I would say, for the United States, and I hope many would agree with me, is that the investor has to bring clean funds into the United States. They're vetted heavily. Obviously, it's incumbent upon the investor to show that those funds were obtained in a lawful way, and later on, more importantly, to create at least 10 new jobs as a result of the investment. So every investor that's come into the United States and investing his or her funds is actually having to show that they have created 10 new jobs. Now obviously 10 jobs per person, fairly modest, but it adds up, and as I've said before, I can't think of a time, with possibly the exception of the Great Depression, when America needs jobs more than it does now. So this is a tit for tat. Sorry, turn that off. It's a tit for tat approach. You know, on the one hand, you have a situation where individuals are obtaining permanent residence. On the other hand, the United States is obtaining investment funds and badly needed jobs in areas where they perhaps otherwise wouldn't be created.
Let me stop you there, Tony. At the seminar last week, I think it was Ron Klasko who made the statement that for the first year it looks like we might exhaust the available visas. 10,000 visas are made available for this particular provision of the immigration laws. We have never exhausted those 10, we as a country have never exhausted those 10,000 visas, but we are close now, which suggests that more and more foreign domestic investment is coming into the United States via this program.
Most definitely. As you say, 10,000 visas are set aside annually for the whole of the EB-5 program. One should say that the EB-5 is divided into two types. There's the EB-5 individual. Someone might come to the country and create their own business and obviously then demonstrate they've created the required jobs. Alternatively, about 95% of EB-5 investors now invest through regional centres. They have been set up all over the states and allow people effectively to pool their funds for larger projects. Now the advantage of that obviously is that bigger projects can be created, more jobs can be created. It's the power of multiplication. But what is important is that in the past we've come nowhere near the 10,000 people mark. 3,000 visas have been earmarked for the regional centre programme, even though the reality is that most of the visas issued go to the regional centre. I think this year we're all recognising there's a danger, if that's the right word, that they will exceed the quota. And what that would mean is that anybody who is in process would have to wait until the beginning of the next fiscal year for visas to become available again. In real terms, it probably won't lead to too much of a delay, but it's a positive step to the extent that it shows that what has been set aside for a programme that has perhaps taken a little time to gather steam is now certainly moving towards the very edge of the limits of those visas that are made available.
You used a very interesting phrase there, program that's gathering steam. There are now close to 200 regional centers created across the United States. And those regional centers, some are more active than others, and they've been generating a lot of economic activity that turns out to be millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars in the case. Do you see this as a useful program advancing in the future?
Yes, I do. I think, I can use my own example to give you an idea of how it's developed. I was looking to invest in the EB-5 Regional Centre project in 2006. We invested in early 2007 and came here at the end of 2007. When I was looking to invest, there were really only 3 or 4 regional centres at that time from whom to choose projects. So, it was at the same time an easy choice, at the same time a difficult choice. One size fits all. Now that there are 220 regional centres, we are spoiled for choice. The reality is that many of those regional centres have yet to prove themselves, and obviously for the investor it's important to do all the background research. But I think we've seen with the death of the capital market, the banks not willing to lend money, the fact that the EB-5 has been seen by many as perhaps a new and in some cases the only source of funds available.
Well,
so
excellent. I want to thank you for taking the time today. We're going to go up into a break, and then we're going to come back, and on our next show, folks, ladies and gentlemen, Anthony will be back next week, and we'll talk further about the EB-5 program and bring some more of its nuances to your attention. Anthony, thank you for being here today. We'll see you again on Thursday.
Thank you, Al.
Well, thank you very much to Anthony Corder. Welcome back, folks. Actually, you're only going to see me for a moment or two because I'm going to break away now and introduce to you Tony Macaluso. You'll remember from last week's show that Tony Macaluso is an international realtor of some renown, and he has now agreed to do a 4-part segment on the international real estate market and its impacts here in Palm Beach County and southeastern Florida, with a twist to the immigration elements, as we have always do. So, Tony, thank you very much for agreeing, and take it away.
Thank you, Al. As we were talking about during the break before, we're going to approach some of these segments that I would like to do for you by having a topical matter. Today, we're going to talk about Canada and its impacts here in the state of Florida. Canada has purchased about $2 billion worth of real estate over the last 10 years on an annual basis. In fact, in 2008, which was not considered a very good year at all in real estate, the Canadians spent about $2.7 billion in Florida real estate. In fact, about 8% of all the homes that are sold in Florida are sold to Canadians. About 23% of international business in the United States is Canadian purchasers. So they're a huge component of our real estate business. Now, about the Canadian dollar has really been the impetus to see this happen. Back around 2008, when our currency was weakening, the Canadian dollar actually got quite a bit stronger, at one point trading over a US dollar. And because their banking system was very strong, and the fact that they didn't have any crazy banking schemes during the time that they were we were going through our process, giving away money with no money down and very little details on people's credentials, they still maintain their regular banking standards with fairly substantial down payments. And as a result, the real estate in Canada has appreciated very nicely, and there's quite a bit of equity that has amassed in Canadian real estate, which they use equity loans to come down here. And the good news for U.S. participants are the fact that the Canadians, by and large, 9 out of 10, pay cash for their U.S. real estate holdings. Now, they can borrow money from our banks. The banks will still look for about a 30 to 35% down payment, but the vast majority of them, about 9 out of 10, pay cash for the properties that they buy here. About $9.4 billion in U.S. real estate was purchased last year alone by Canadians. And of course, we are the recipients of a good portion of the people trying to get out of cold weather climates. New York City was a recipient as well. They bought over $2.1 billion in commercial properties just in the New York City metropolitan area. So we see they have an impact not only here in Florida, but throughout the entire country. Canadians are one of our top 3 trading partners, and so we do a lot of business both ways, both going to Canada and from Canada. Now, 10 years ago, I have to tell you that the Canadian dollar was worth about 68 US cents. And of course, that change has been radical. When I was selling Canadians real estate back in the 80s, their currency was trading at about 80 cents to the dollar. And that didn't stop them from buying it all. But now that their dollar is parity pretty much with the US dollar, there's certainly the opportunity for them to consider our real estate. Also consider that the average price of U.S. real estate was about $177,000 last year. Sun Sentinel, in a recent issue, was talking about foreclosures in 2011 in Palm Beach County being about $121,340. Now compare that to the average house in Canada being about $365,000. They look at our prices here as a downright bargain. When you're talking about less than half of what it would cost them to buy a home in their own country, coming down here, get their little escape from the cold. Many of them purchase as vacation homes, which when they're not in use, they can use for family and friends to come down here and enjoy. And it probably isn't any secret to most of us that live here in Florida with the number of Canadian plates that we see on the roadways almost on a continuous basis, starting at about October right through to about May. Now, not only are the values of our properties an attraction, the fact is that we lost value somewhere between 40 and 60% in a lot of the retirement and vacation home areas. So along with them looking at properties here 5 years ago at the height of our problems, the U.S. prices have come down substantially. Their prices remain the same. As a matter of fact, their home appreciation is about 7.7% a year. So while we've seen a decline in the value of real estate, they've actually had a nice appreciation factor that they can use. And so with the fact that they have cash that they can pull out of the equities of their home, the fact that our prices are considerably down, the fact that their currency now trades very favorably against the US dollar, it makes it a very good opportunity for them to come here and take advantage of what we have available. And we don't feel like we're taken advantage of because we have a lot of excess inventory now that we would certainly like to see go under contract, and that would certainly help the equities of the homeowners who are still in their properties waiting for them to come back And of course, we look at that as a very favorable result of Canadian inputs in here. The other area where Canadians purchase are when they have their children going to colleges and universities here in the U.S. It makes perfect sense for them to acquire a property right nearby the university or the college where their student can actually live in. The additional rooms can be rented out to others, maybe other Canadian students as well. It's a perfect scenario for them to own some real estate in the state of Florida and be able to satisfy one of the second biggest expenses of a college education after its tuition, which is housing expense. Just think about 3 million Canadians visit Florida. That is 10% of the Canadian population. Wouldn't we like to do business with a little more? Al, I'm going to turn it back to you now.
Welcome back, folks. Here's the fun part of the show for me. We're going to do fireworks and politics and go right into kudos and KOs and before we bring the show to close. I want to talk, I think I mentioned in the last couple of weeks that the Palm Beach County School Board has been doing this search for a new superintendent. They put out this RFP. They had a whole bunch of people respond. They actually whittled that list down to 3 finalists. And it doesn't appear that the school board is happy with any of them because now they've suggested that the interim superintendent who took the job as interim superintendent on the promise that he would not seek the job as superintendent is being pushed into the limelight, causing at least one of the 3 finalists, Tom Watkins, from the state of Michigan and formerly the president of Economic Council, to withdraw his name with regards to it. And I thought that Tom's comment in the paper was worthy of action or comment, and I thought it was reflective of what is the fireworks and politics that I anticipate will happen in the next couple of weeks. And that is, it's quoted, asked Friday why he was passing on the chance to lead the nation's 11th largest school district, Watkins said, quote, "We teach our students to behave appropriately, act responsibly, do the right things, and play by the rules. These are good lessons for adults as well." He declined to elaborate further. I thought that was kind of interesting. I actually called Tom, who's a very personal friend of mine for many, many years, and asked him if he would be willing to come on the show and do an interview, and he declined. He said, "I've said what I had to say. It's time to move on. There's no point. It's politics playing out in the school board. There's no point in belaboring the issue." So, Tom, we thank you for trying. We really look forward to finding a way for you to come back to South Florida. You are a quality guy, and the school board will be what the school board is. And so, onward and upward. I want to also refer back to some topic that we had last week. Last week we did an interview with Jorge Pescara, the CEO and president of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And there has been we didn't talk about this subject on that show, but it was interesting because it hit the papers a couple of days later. The Convention and Visitors Bureau and all of the Tourist Development Council funded organizations have had space leased in a very expensive Class A building on Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard here in the city of West Palm Beach. And they've been paying for that space for many years. Those leases are coming up. Austerity is causing the county commission to suggest that those agencies should move into the county office building in downtown West Palm Beach. The board of directors of the Convention and Visitors Bureau and other visitors bureaus think that that's a bad idea. And one of the county commissioners, Commissioner Bert Aronson, actually came up with what I think is a brilliant plan. There is a building that's owned by the county, completely underutilized, right on the airport property, near the Airport Hilton Hotel on Southern Boulevard in West Palm Beach, that should be renovated and should be brought into the fold. And there was an article that suggested a vacant building would make a great visitors bureau. I agree. I think that the fireworks and politics there is to get the county commissioners to move in that direction, and that would be a wonderful thing. I'd like to take us down to kudus and chaos. We reported that U.S. tourists were abducted in Egypt a couple of weeks ago. I'm happy to report, for a kudu, that those tourists have been released. But for a KO, I would suggest that Americans need to think twice about traveling to Egypt in these really difficult times. It's very unpredictable. Traveling in the Middle East with a U.S. passport is nothing short of dangerous. And this played itself out and came to a good conclusion. But we still have the hostages that are being held. Even the Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood's son, is still being held and not being allowed by the military to leave the country. KO, Harry Reid, Senator Reid, either lead, follow, or get out of the way. In this case, get out of the way, pal. He refuses again this year to bring a budget to the Senate floor for debate. He argues that you need 60 senators to pass a budget. That's not accurate. You need 50. What he doesn't want is he wants a filibuster-proof vote. He doesn't have it. He won't bring the budget. He's not doing his job. He's a blowhard. Mr. Reid, bring it to the floor for debate. Kudu, input sought for the West Palm Beach waterfront district. I gave it a kudu because I wanted to be kind. But the fact of the matter is, it spent $30 million renovating the waterfront to have events there that attract people. Back then, and I know because I was a candidate for mayor back then. Back then, I realized that the whole open field concept, which is not working to attract people, was simply to satisfy the demands of the boat show and of Sunfest. Those guys should not be dictating to the city, and we should have not spent the $30 million if we didn't have a plan. So kudu to the city for beginning to look at that. KO to the city for taking so long to get around to it. And finally, KO, City of Riviera Beach. You got to do something about that eroding coastline. It's a county problem, it's a city problem, but Singer Island is the prettiest beach in Southeast Florida, in my opinion, and you really are faced with some challenges. So I'd like to bring the show to a close this week and remind you all that we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me on this show each week. Al Zucaro, Citizens of the World, at the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at immigration, culture, politics, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Good night now. Folks, welcome to Citizens of the World. Thank you again for joining me each week. As you know, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week here in sunny South Palm Beach County, the city of Boca Raton, Florida, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Tonight I'd like to open up my show with a reference back to a few weeks ago when we reported that the clubs, the country clubs, and many of the restaurants here in Palm Beach County were taking advantage of the H-2B guest worker program and were hiring almost 2,000 people. And some of the things that led to that, or some of the criteria that leads to their being able to do that, is that they have to recruit foreign nationals well in advance of the date that the foreign national actually is going to be employed, making it a disadvantage for the U.S. worker who is not thinking about 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road employment. They're thinking about immediate employment. Well, that issue was actually brought up by Commissioner Aronson. And you know what? I mentioned Commissioner Aronson in the last show with regards to the CVB and its new home. I want to mention him again because I really believe that Commissioner Aronson doesn't get the credit for many of the things that he does above and beyond the obligation he has as a county commissioner. In this case, he brought to the forefront this issue of foreign workers and worked with the hotel and motel associations to come up with some solution. I don't think he can take credit for the U.S. government now promulgating new rules for the hiring of locals over foreigners, but he certainly brought it up to the heightened its awareness in the community, and he certainly gets to take a serious bow because now people are actually reacting to it. But I want to just reference the new guest worker guidelines. And as reported in the local newspaper, the U.S. Department of Labor has written new rules for employers seeking H-2B visas to import foreign guest workers. The rules require the companies to make a greater effort to seek local employees. Now, there are 4 bullet points. 1, employers must document a genuine need to import workers before they can apply for an H-2B visa. 2, employers must advertise jobs locally until 21 days before the jobs are to begin. Currently, they can end local recruitment about 100 days before the job begins, what I was pointing out before. 3, Workforce Alliance, which is an organization charged with helping to find employment for people, will play a larger role in overseeing and documenting local recruitment activities by employers. And 4, greater protection are required for the imported H-2B worker. Now, I make no comment as to whether this is going to work or not. We will see over time. But I do make a comment to the effort that is being made to begin to offer opportunity to local workers and protect the interests of the foreign worker as well. The Hotel and Motel Association has agreed to begin workforce training. Workforce Alliance has agreed to oversee the program. I think this has a legitimate shot, not only here in Southeast Florida or in Palm Beach County, but throughout the United States, where those numbers become exponential. So I commend that, and I offer you that as an observation. Now, as you know, we are going to go next into our Immigration and Economic Development program, and we'll move into that right away. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as a continuation from our show on Tuesday, we've invited Anthony Corder back to further explain and elaborate on the nuances of an EB-5 visa. As you remember from the previous show, Anthony is a barrister in England at this point, still a barrister in England. He is a practicing attorney here in the United States whose practice focuses primarily on immigration law and investor visas. He is a user of this program, relocating his family here. He is a husband and a father and a former pilot in Her Majesty's Air Force. So welcome back, Anthony, and we'll pick up again from where we left off the other day. The other day we were talking about the expansion of the program and the economic impacts it has, particularly in the capital market, and we were talking about the choices now made available to the investor. Perhaps we could talk a little bit about how communities here in the United States will benefit from the regional center concept. For instance, it's designed to encourage more activity than less in targeted employment areas or in rural communities, and the benefits of the investor moving in that direction.
Yes. Well, as I think I indicated last time I was on your show, the EB-5 program allows individuals to start, if they want, their own business. They have to show that they can invest the required amount of money and create at least 10 jobs. For many people, that's not particularly a useful option. They don't want to run that kind of business necessarily. So the regional centres have developed to allow people to pool their funds to effectively invest into someone else's project and if you like, the power of multiplication to create larger projects and more jobs. Because the EB5 program allows investors to invest $500,000 as opposed to the required $1 million if the project is located in either a targeted employment area or a rural area. And a targeted employment area is simply an area that has 1.5 times the national average unemployment. So these are areas that really do encourage employment, want jobs to be created. Because investors would rather invest $500,000 as opposed to $1 million, the regional centres have been very successful in attracting that kind of investment to areas that would, frankly, otherwise not have a hope in hell of trying to get that kind of money. So, really, I think the regional centre has been inordinately successful, perhaps more successful than anyone expected it to be, which is why, as we discussed last time, we are going to achieve this year, potentially, the limit of all of the visas that are available for the EB5 program.
Anthony, in your experience, where are the investors coming from?
They're coming from all over. I think originally when the program started, they were like me, a lot of them from the UK. We then had a situation where many of them, and they still are, come from China. Many of the Chinese investors have children that are studying here and who want to stay here once they've completed their studies. Vietnam is very much now an emerging market, but I've had investors really from everywhere. You name it: South Africa, Ethiopia, inquiries from all over Europe. India is a very sort of big market. You name a country, there are likely to be EB5 investors over here. But certainly the big ones traditionally have been China, India, now perhaps Vietnam, South Korea, UK.
You see a shift to the Latin American market at all coming?
Definitely. There's an awful lot of Latin American interest in the EB5. A lot of people coming from Mexico, Venezuela, again, Ecuador, Costa Rica. I mean, I really have had clients from almost every Latin American country that you could name.
I want to make a nuance here. There are two visas that are labeled investor visas, the E2 visa and the EB5 visa. The E2 visa requires a treaty of commerce and trade between the United States and the country of origin of the foreign national. EB5, on the other hand, is available to anyone from anywhere in the world that can prove two elements: good moral character and source of funds. That's a big difference. Could you elaborate a little bit on it?
It's a major difference. For many people, the E2 visa simply isn't an option because they come from countries that don't have treaties. South Africa is a good example. A lot of people from South Africa would like to have businesses over here, but there's no treaty, so the E2 visa is not available to them. So the EB5 visa for those people is often the only visa option that's available. The other difference, of course, is that an E2 visa is a temporary visa. It's not a permanent visa. It doesn't lead to permanent residence. And it has other limitations. For instance, if the E2 visa holder's children turn 21, no matter how long they've been in the United States, they need to then leave and go back to their home country unless they can find a visa category into which they can fit. That doesn't happen with the EB5.
Let's elaborate just a little bit more on the timeline before we run out of time here. The money has to be invested by regulation from CIS for a 5-year period of time. The investor gets conditional residence for a period of time, but in essence, we're talking about 3-4 years during the process for an investor to get from the beginning of it to the end, which is the lifting of the conditional residency. Is that an accurate timeline?
Yeah, I think it is. There's no specific minimum period during which the money must remain invested. It has to be invested prior to the filing of the initial petition, and it has to be invested until at least the removal of conditions. That period is a sort of a moving period depending on how long the processes have taken. I think realistically money is going to be invested for at least 5 years, in many cases more than that, and so EB5 investors will have to satisfy themselves certainly that they are able to do without those funds or have those funds tied up in what might be investments with moderate returns for at least a 5-year period, if not more.
As we come to the end of the segment, at least tell the audience, if they wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, very easily. They can telephone me on 239-298-0441. That's 239-298-0441.
And that's in Naples, Florida, right?
That's in Naples, in Florida. Or they can find me at the website www.eb5 immigrate-to-the-States.com.
Let me see if I understood that. It's www.immigrate-to-the-states.com.
Correct.
Well, excellent. Anthony, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your day, both Tuesday and Thursday this week. I look forward to being able to interview you in the future. Perhaps we'll do a follow-up on this and maybe talk about L visas and E2 visas and things of that nature. You're a good friend. I appreciate knowing you, and say hello to your wife, Tarina, for me.
I will do. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
We'll chat soon.
Thank you.
Well, folks, I hope you find that interesting. I'm going to have Anthony Corder back on a regular basis. He is a very prominent attorney. He has a significant practice. He's becoming a real voice in immigration and economic development, and I appreciate the fact that he's a friend and he's going to continue to work with us. Right now, we're going to go into the next segment. And the next segment is another professional. You remember last week we had part one of a four-part series with Tony Macaluso, an international realtor and educator on international real estate developments and their economic impacts within the marketplace and in relation to immigration. So Tony, take it away.
Thank you, Al. It's wonderful to be back here again. Today I'd like to kind of talk about a couple of things, money and measurements. I think when we talk about international, sometimes like domestic, when you have a contract, you want to have a meeting of the minds. You want people to really understand what they're buying and what they're selling. And I think one of the biggest issues that we face is understanding how much money they have and how much is it worth in our money. And also, one of the most difficult things is the fact that we're one of the very few last countries on earth that don't subscribe to the metric system. Now, the metric system is prevalent throughout the entire planet, with the exception of 3 little countries and us, the largest industrial country in the world, and we don't subscribe to the metric system. Now, any of you have been working on your automobiles over the course of your life, like I did when I was a young man, all of a sudden found out that your SEA wrenches don't work on some of the cars that we were getting here because those are all metric sizes. And now if you're a mechanic, you've got 2 sets of wrenches just to be able to work on your car. Well, the same is true about when you're expressing sizes for people who are buying real estate. The fact is that we're still working on King George's foot. Yep, that's where we got it. That was the size of King George's foot. Guy had some pretty big feet. But the fact is that the rest of the world works on meters. And meters contain about 10.7639 square feet. So a square meter is almost a little larger than 3 feet by 3 feet, 10.7639. So when you're expressing your house as being a 2,500 square foot home, the fact is that you can drop off one of those zeros and say, well, it's about 250 square meters. And people will understand mentally that meeting of the minds about what size home they're actually going to be looking at. And I think one of the suggestions I can give you as a potential home seller is that make sure your agents, when they publish that information in the multiple listing service, not only list the square footage for a domestic population, but list the square meters. Because today, almost every one of those listings is going to appear on multiple websites, which are accessible to the entire planet. When somebody's looking at another country at your site and they see 2,500 square feet, they would have absolutely no idea about the size of that property. But if you were to say it was about 250 square meters, they'd understand exactly how big that is, and it's extremely important. So if you really want to market to get that international buyer coming to your property, you want to make sure your agents are up on and get that information in a proper format that people can understand. The second biggest issue is one of the reasons why we have become very attractive, which is the fact that the US dollar has lost a lot of its value across the world. For instance, if you were to bring 100,000 euros right here into the United States, we would hand you $132,000. If you brought 100,000 British pounds, we would give you 159,000 US dollars. Taking our money or their money and bringing it here is like cashing in on lotto tickets. We're paying them a premium. When the average price here in Palm Beach County for a foreclosure was $141,340 according to the Sun Sentinel, think about coming over here with 100,000 of theirs and getting 157,000 of ours. Now, the fact is that money is good everywhere. It trades very well. we have opportunities in other countries to take our money. If you were to go to India, if you went to Mexico, if you went to Turkey, all of those countries still respect our money and it still trades very well. But the fact is that ours doesn't trade very well in some of the more industrial countries, and when they come here with their currency, they can buy a whole lot more. If you want to check out sometime what currencies are worth, if you've got a buyer coming in from overseas, go to a website called xe.com. xe.com gives you conversion rates up to date. And if you'd like a little more information about me and my company, go to portsideproperties.com. We'll look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Val, back to you.
Well, welcome back, folks, and now for a little fun in my fireworks and politics and kudos and KOs segment of the show as I bring the show to closure. Last week, Forbes magazine published a list of the 10 most miserable cities in the United States. And in that list, it listed West Palm Beach as number 4. So I'm going to talk a little bit about West Palm Beach, because when they say West Palm Beach, they really meant more a West Palm Beach general area, which takes into account Palm Beach County. And the reaction from both the political base in West Palm Beach and the political base in Palm Beach County has been nothing short of interesting. But before I go to the specific, I want to go to the general. The list actually was very interesting because it listed Miami as the number 1 most miserable city in the country. It listed West Palm Beach as the number 4 city, and it listed Fort Lauderdale as the number 7 city. So it is an indictment on the entire section of the southeast sector of the state of Florida. Now, those of us who live here really don't understand how anybody could come to those conclusions, but they based some of their findings on corruption, and they based some of their findings on the drop in real estate value because Florida has been so hard hit, etc., etc. Now, it's drawn some very significant comments. I'll read just a section. West Palm Beach was noted for the political scandal involving Boynton Beach Mayor Jose Rodriguez, who was suspended by Governor Rick Scott last month following his arrest on charges that he used his position to try to kill an abuse investigation into the treatment of his estranged wife and her daughter. We reported that, as did every media here a few weeks ago. We talked about Boynton Beach falling apart, but that's a recent issue. They couldn't have possibly come to the number 4 conclusion based on that. I think that's just fodder. They were talking more about the general corruption that exists here in Palm Beach County, and according to the county administrator, who is quoted very interesting, he says here, he says, if someone makes a decision to not come to or think less of Palm Beach County because of this story, that's bad judgment on their part. Now, the county administrator basically said, to hell with Forbes. Oh, wait, here, it's even better. He said, in response to this email string, County Administrator Bob Weissman called Forbes' ranking crap, saying it had nothing to do with livability. Quote, screw Forbes, Weissman wrote. If someone makes a decision not to come to or think less of Palm Beach County because of the story, that's bad judgment on their part. Now, I don't condone Bob's angry reflection, but the fact of the matter is I tend to agree. South Florida has been hit very hard by the real estate crisis. So has other communities in the United States. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, all part of the same MSA. It's still the gateway to Latin and South America. It's still got the best location and the best access to the Caribbean from any place else in the world. It still is in the recovery phase. To the issue of scandal, although I am not a fond supporter of the Inspector General's office because I think it is a huge overreaction to a very minor problem, the fact is that all governments in Southeast Florida have reacted very dramatically to the idea of scandal and have put in a lot of safeguards. The Forbes magazine article seems to have overlooked this. So the next time I see Steve Forbes, which isn't that often, I'm going to reference that. But the main point I wanted to make is that it's not a West Palm Beach city issue. It's an indictment on Southeast Florida, Miami number 1, Fort Lauderdale number 7, and West Palm Beach number 4. So I think that we have some work to do to recoup from that. That's what Jorge Pescara is going to have to do over at the Convention and Visitors Bureau coming up. The next subject I wanted to take is Venezuela. There is a lot of activity coming to South Florida from Venezuela. We talked about this in the EB5 segment. I see it in the tourism segment. Many people are looking to get out of there. Interestingly enough, what used to be a for sure thing with regards to Chavez being reelected as the president of the country may not be a sure thing anymore. And it appears that an opponent has emerged, and that opponent is Mayor Capriles. And the polls show that Capriles' record in office, energetic style, avoidance of confrontation and rhetoric, and emphasis on education, employment, and security give him the best chance of beating Chavez among the opposition candidates. So we will watch very encouragingly that Venezuela find new leadership, because Venezuela's ties and its support for the Iranian terrorist regime is unacceptable in the Western Hemisphere, and it has to be stopped not only in Venezuela but in Cuba and other places where Iran is trying to get a foothold. That truly could lead to fireworks in politics right off of our shores, a very dangerous circumstance. So kudos and chaos. An article hit the paper the other day I thought quite interesting. Ethnic fests flourish in South Florida, and then it lists a few of them. There is a Greek festival in Fort Lauderdale, a Chinese New Year's in Coral Gables. There is the Turkish festival in Broward County. There is the India Festival in West Palm Beach. There is the Billy Swamp River Safari in the Indian reservations, and there is the Scottish festivals and Highland Games, Guyana Independence Gala and Culture, and on and on and on. Point of this, kudos to our community for becoming more and more international with more and more pockets of people. KO. FBI announced that it had a file on Steve Jobs, and they had a file of a man who grew up in the 60s and the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and in the file they said Jobs did drugs, twisted the truth, etc. Well, you know what, folks? Anyone who grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s who didn't do drugs wasn't doing anything. The fact of the matter is that it was a drug culture. The man was brilliant. He created a circumstance that changed the face of the world, employs hundreds of thousands of people on a global basis, and it was a disingenuous and a disservice to his memory to even publish that the FBI had such a file. Who cares? Kudu, Boca's best kept secret. I reported a long time ago that my wife and I went to Latvia, and while we were there, we went to a place that had musical instruments and antique cars. What I didn't know at that time, and found out subsequently, that there are two brothers, Bob Milhouse and Paul Milhouse, here in Boca Raton, Florida, that have a 39,000 square foot museum where they have all sorts of musical operations, musical instruments, and music boxes, and cars and carousels, and they are auctioning off. They have decided that it's time for them to let their prized possessions go. It's going to be auctioned, I think, this week or next week, and it is expected to bring $40 million in the sale. I have to tell you, this is a major loss to the community. If you ever had the opportunity to see this space that they've created, it's just absolutely incredible, and I thank the Millhouses for allowing me the opportunity a few months ago to actually see it before it's dismantled. And finally, I want to read something that was sent to by one of our viewers, George Giftos, and it's about voter ID. Voter ID does not disenfranchise the poor, the elderly, the minorities. Voter ID does not disenfranchise fraud, illegal, and dubious characters, does disenfranchise fraud, illegal characters, and dubious characters who want to manipulate the system dishonestly. Without voter ID, the ones who play by the rules are the ones being disenfranchised. Those against voter ID are left to manipulate the system for their own benefit and gain dishonestly. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, George, for sending it in. Voter ID, it makes no sense not to have people be able to identify who they are before they exercise one of the greatest cherished rights that we have in this country, and that's the ability to vote for our political leadership. So anyone that thinks that that's a bad idea, they're just missing the mark. So, in bringing the show to the close, I want to remind you, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week, Al Zucaro, from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Good night.